I know.
Let's start. All right, we are live.
Welcome, everyone, to another Facebook Live with Dr. Nelva Bryant. I am Greta Russo, and before me is the lovely Dr. Bryant. Dr. Bryant, say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Bryant. Nice meeting you all. Thank you for joining in and following us on our Facebook Lives. We've been doing these for quite some time now and sharing information on different stakeholders in the animal transportation industry. And I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about what we do because I was just saying a second ago, there's no one out doing kind of the things that we're doing. And I'm excited because, again, we're sharing something that's, that sharing things, making an awareness on pet travel, zoo animal transportation, making people aware of different forms of transportation for their pets if they don't want to go in cabin or by cargo, that there's potentially jets that have the service to transport your pets, and just a lot of different things we've been doing these past 3 years. So I'm excited about it. For me, a little bit background more about myself. I am, like I said, I'm a veterinarian. Yes, I am working with Delta Airlines. I'm their on-staff veterinarian. I've been with them since 2018. And you might wonder, why would an airline have a veterinarian? Well, if you're transporting animals, you really should have a veterinarian on staff. Unfortunately, my position and role is very unique because I'm probably the only veterinarian doing what I'm doing nationally and potentially worldwide. Delta Airlines is the only airline that I'm aware of that has a veterinarian on staff. So hopefully that will change in the future. But for the time being, I was brought on staff to help review and revise the policies for animal transportation. And I enjoy that role. Within that role, on a side note, what I've done with When Pets Fly is to share pet-centric travel education and just provide resources to help better prepare owners for air travel with their pets because that information is lacking. So we'll talk about it in a minute. Greta, please, because you are the backbone to a lot of things I do, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Greta Russo. I am on Team When Pets Fly, helping out with a lot of our marketing and social media and stuff like that. And also getting the message out about pet-centric transportation. And, what I love is that we started out primarily focused on pet parents. But as you and I went on this journey, we figured it makes so much sense to bring in all other aspects of animal transportation. It has been such a wonderful journey to be able to learn and grow with that. And with all the people that we are meeting, with all the people that is in your Rolodex, it's really been a nice educational opportunity for everyone who's viewing. Last year we hit close to 150,000 viewers with our Facebook Live. That's a lot of information that we shared with potential people that the information could have been new to. So I look forward to seeing how many people that we've reached this year and continue that growth. On the 22nd is our 3-year anniversary with Facebook Live. So I'm really excited about that. Of this month, 22nd of this month. So, time flies. I just can't believe we've had that many conversations, but it really has been fun. It really has been, everyone is unique. And I look forward to every Friday that we have these.
Oh, yeah. I think it's great, too. Again, all the different stakeholders, all the different people that have an input on preparing animals for transportation. Was it last week or gosh, I'm forgetting time frame, but I'm thinking about Derek with sounds and music and getting pets, relieving anxiety through music, stuff that you wouldn't even think about, but that has an impact with it can have an impact with transporting pets and everything. So we've been doing a lot of great things and everything. I'm so excited about that. So, and I looking forward to 2025 and all the different things. Well, actually looking forward to this year, because we still have a lot of great things coming up this year, but 2025 is going to be even better. So it's really great. Really great.
Yeah, we still have 2 more months of Facebook Lives of great people coming up. But just to go back to Derek for a second, I know that his music has been scientifically customized for dogs and cats. I wonder how it would do with wild animals.
Right.
So, like when they're transporting zoo animals, like for example, the pandas just came from China to Washington, D.C. Would they have enjoyed classical music for their whole journey? So I wonder if he's ever even thought about that, because zoos probably transport more than, companies that take cats and dogs.
Right. I wonder though, that will be an interesting study to have, but again, think about it. There's so many various types of zoo animals, but it would still be a good study to find out what would an orangutan like compared to, I don't know, a red panda or a regular panda. What would be the difference? Are there any differences? So it would be a good study to find out. And I'm sure ultimately over time, there needs to be studies like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure as he grows, it'll maybe he'll even get into that, because both you and Derek are trailblazing your own path. And because no one else has done it before, if you think about it, it can be overwhelming with either how much you have to do or all the things you want to do. Right. But as long as you stay organized, you've got many years of doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And things don't have to happen overnight too. Sometimes that's a hard thing to really think to yourself, I can be doing this, I can be doing that. Yeah. And you might compare yourself to somebody else and think, oh, well, they're there, you should be there, but you don't know how long it took for them to get where they're going. My journey, like you said, actually has been 4 years. I mean, 3 years with you, but it's been 4 years of really sharing information. So it's now slowly materializing. I may not be, there's things that I could probably potentially be working on, and which I haven't, that's on the, you could say it's in the pipeline of developing things further with videos and other things that I can do. But right now we're focusing on what we can at this present time, and just moving forward and everything. Right. So in time. Well,
I love the fact that Delta has embraced you as a veterinarian to look over all of their live animals. That is important, whether it is a cat or a dog, or even a baby chick, up to wild animals. It's important to have somebody on the staff that understands animals, and create the policies and procedures in dealing with them firsthand. So that in itself is amazing, and I just wanted to just applaud you for that and all that you're doing. So even though people may not see it day to day, all the work that you're doing, you really are making a difference. And it is a lot for one person to do, but eventually people will start to see the differences that airlines are making when it comes to transporting their animals.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, I just wanted to bring up, and this past week I spoke at in Atlantic City. That was such a great opportunity to share with my fellow veterinarians and veterinary technicians, all veterinary community, basically. Great opportunity there. I'm so thankful for Dr. Adam Crispin for putting me on as being their faculty. I actually have another session that I'll be doing with them in December 6th through the 8th in Long Beach, California. So I'll be a part of that session as well. But it was a great opportunity to share this information, as far as just, I focused on the regulations of pet travel, because it's actually extremely regulated. Folks don't realize it. That, and then my other presentation was on just a plane ride experience for the pet. So kind of showing what the pet will experience, so that as fellow veterinarians, how can we better prepare our pets, our pet owners for air transport, basically. So it was a great presentation.
Because honestly, even though they're veterinarians, they did not, they probably don't even know what the animals should be prepared for and what the pet parents should be prepared for. So, I think you educating veterinarians is crucial because they are the front lines of your pet's health. So, having you teaching them more, I think that is definitely a great thing and maybe something we should explore more into next year as well.
Yeah. I mean, something simple as we keep saying over and over, the crates, making sure they're comply with IATA, the International Air Transport Association, their requirements instead of being airline approved. That's going to be a major factor on the safety of animals during transport. So, and as veterinarians, advocates for animals, we've got to start sharing that information for the safety of animals during transport. Also making sure they're medically fit and sound for air transport. Just there's a list of it. Trust me, I can go on and on. And we can have I can relive my presentation with you here, but we don't have time for that right now. But there's a lot that's shared, that needs to be shared with fellow veterinarians, and hopefully it will trickle down to our pet owners.
Absolutely. Well, our guest is here, so let's bring on Ms. Sarah Walker and introduce her to everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Well, I'm going to just read your introduction very quickly, and then we'll have you introduce yourself more to everyone. So just give me one moment. So everyone, please help me welcome Sarah Walker. She is the Senior Advisor on Wildlife Trafficking for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. In this role, she oversees AZA's Wildlife Trafficking Alliance program and AZA's Reduce the Risk initiative. Sarah has over 15 years of experience working in the fields of natural resource protection, climate change, animal welfare, and wild trafficking. Everyone, please help me welcome Sarah Walker. Yay!
Awesome.
I love that. I love that. I need to get that around my house.
Walk in the room and have people applaud you when you walk in the room.
Yes.
That's awesome. And we normally segue better. We didn't segue better into this situation, but we brought Sarah for us. Well, I met Sarah through Rochelle Watkins, I believe, and we were discussing basically wildlife trafficking. And FYI, Delta has completed United for Wildlife. Basically, we are a member of United for Wildlife, which is basically can you actually? I'll leave you to describe it a little better if you don't mind, because I'm
sure.
But
United for
Wildlife,
yeah,
United for Wildlife is a great thing. Basically, it's saying, as far as the airline being a part of it, is saying that we are recognizing the fact that potentially airlines are a source of people trafficking animals. So there's an awareness is needed. So we actually have training and sessions and stuff in reference to that with Delta Airlines and developing that further. But please share more about that. But that was the main thing that I wanted to bring Sarah here to talk about, bring awareness to, because it's extremely important for folks to realize the significance of it, and potentially that you could go somewhere and not even realize that you're part of it. So please, that was the main reason bringing you here. I'm sorry I didn't segue better with you here, but I'm excited to have you here, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I love talking about this topic. So anytime.
Well, it's so great to have you, Sarah, and to finally meet you. I have a trivia fact today. It popped up on my computer. Today is World Okapi Day, and the Okapi is the giraffe's only relative.
Cool.
All right.
There's a day for everything.
You're like, okay. Yeah.
There is a day for everything, and we do actually utilize many of those animal celebration days to raise awareness for certain species that are trafficked, and they're really a great hook to be able to educate people about things that they don't know about. So thank you for that. I did not know that.
You're welcome. Well, you know what? Before you get really into things, why don't you tell us about yourself? What is AZA, and what do you do for the Association of Zoo and Aquariums?
Yeah, so AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, is a nonprofit, and it's essentially an accrediting body of different zoos and aquariums around the world. We primarily have members in North America, Mexico, Canada, United States, but we also have members in 13 other countries. So we are global in scope. And it's holding zoos and aquariums to incredibly high standards. It's the gold standard of animal care and well-being, education, research, public awareness, really making sure that they are doing everything they can in their power to make sure the animals in their care are taken very well care of, and also ensuring species are surviving in the wild. And the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance was brought on very smartly, in my opinion, by the CEO in 2018. The Wildlife Trafficking Alliance was formerly its own independent 501c3, and AZA acquired us in 2018 and brought us on to really be the conduit so that their members can support combating wildlife trafficking around the world, get more engaged, talk to their visitors more easily. So it's an opt-in program right now for AZA members. We have over 100 partners, both in the zoo and aquarium space, but also we partner with nonprofits like International Fund for Animal Welfare, World Wildlife Fund, many others, and companies as well. We've been working with companies like eBay, travel companies like Royal Caribbean, JetBlue, since our inception. So really is an all hands on deck, trying to pool as many resources and experts as possible to combat this problem, because it's a big challenge. So it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take all of us working together.
Absolutely.
Well,
Go ahead, Dr. Bryant.
Tell us again, and if you don't mind, just briefly, because you could probably explain it better than I, as far as United for Wildlife, a little bit with that. And then also, let's go into the animals that are most likely trafficked. That would be very
sure. Yeah, United for Wildlife is a great organization. It is part of the Royal Foundation, based out of the UK, although they are starting to expand elsewhere in the world, really with the goal of engaging the private sector in combating wildlife trafficking. They focus on two specific areas, transport and the financial crime side. And they're a great organization. We work with them closely.
Awesome. So if I were to go somewhere, I was gonna say, if I were to go somewhere and for a souvenir, I get a shark fin or I get some ivory. I mean, is it that big of a deal?
Yes, it's a very big deal. And it doesn't seem like a big deal. You might not be thinking about it. Look, I get it. You are traveling to a new part of the world. You're excited to be there. You are at a local market and you want to bring something back that's authentic to that experience and to that culture. And you see a beautiful ivory carving, or you see a tortoiseshell bracelet and think, wow, that's perfect. This species is part of the culture. It's local. This was probably locally sourced. And you pick it up and you bring it back, and you might get arrested when you're trying to come back into the United States. And I hope you do, as a teachable moment. Surely there are many people around the world that unknowingly do these things. So when we talk about wildlife trafficking, we sort of talk about it from two different aspects. One is the general consumer that just might not know what they're doing and what the impact might be, or even that it's illegal to bring back and why. And then we're talking about the other side of trafficking, which is really the organized crime aspect of it. It has become increasingly organized. We see convergence with other types of crime. So typically the same networks of criminals that are trafficking in drugs and guns and humans are also trafficking in wildlife. They're doing all of the things. So we really make sure to target our messaging to mostly the unknowing participant in it. And then working on the criminal organizations is sort of a different aspect of combating wildlife trafficking. But you'll see these things everywhere. I was just telling Nelva before we joined, I was in Hong Kong in the spring, and there were openly selling ivory items in the markets. I saw shark fin soup on the menu of a Thai restaurant. And most people think, well, if this is being sold out in the open, or this is on the menu of a restaurant, surely this is okay to do. But we know that it's not. And that's because millions of elephants have been killed over the last several years for ivory. They're killed for nothing but their ivory. You have to kill typically the entire herd, where conservation efforts have been helping, but we're still losing them faster than they can reproduce. They have a very long gestation period. They have very complex families and social structures, and they're just being poached faster than they can reproduce in the wild. So picking up that ivory trinket might not seem like a big deal, but it really reverberates and has impacts on biodiversity and, of course, the survival of that species. And you might think, well, so that money goes back to the community in which those animals live. And that would be nice to think that that's happening. But again, these are organized criminal syndicates. They're operating at a very high level. They're very sophisticated, often using locals as just a mule to take them to the animal to kill. So, and then we're talking about so many different animals: tigers, big cats for furs and rugs. We're talking about seashells. We're talking about coral coming in for the hobby trade. Many of those could be harvested illegally from the wild. We are also talking about live animals for the exotic pet trade, biomedical research, sometimes for food. Primarily, we're seeing most of the illegal trade of live animals coming in, though, for the exotic pet trade, because demand is so high. And we're talking about everything: birds, reptiles, turtles, coral, again, shells, really anything, small mammals. So it really runs the gamut. And to give you an idea of the number of species that are impacted by this, it's a very long acronym. I don't expect anybody to remember it. So just remember CITES. CITES is the acronym for the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species and Wild Fauna and Flora. Very long. But essentially, this is the global agreement that ensures trade in these species don't impact their survival in the wild. And currently, there's about 4,900 species that are on CITES lists. There's, of course, a tiered structure. So CITES 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the highest level of protection. 3 being, we need to sort of protect this and we'll watch it. And every 3 years they get together. They can uplist species, downlist species. But we're talking thousands of animals that are impacted by the illegal trade.
Right.
Is there a website that people can go to see the list?
Yes, you can go to CITES.org, I believe, is the.
Can you spell that?
And and you can find they're called appendices, and you can see which animals are on. Appendix 1 is going to be like your sea turtles, your elephants, your tigers, things that we know are highly endangered and not many left in the wild.
Can you spell CITES?
CITES.
If you don't mind me adding, it just reminds me of my when I was at CDC. There's a lot of animals that are actually regulated, or if you're coming to the United States, there's specific regulations behind them for disease prevention. I know well, we know about dogs and cats as far as coming in with rabies, so there's specific requirements for them coming to the United States for that. But we've got non-human primates coming in. There's specific requirements because they have some really deadly diseases that if we get, that's not good. So trafficking, say, a primate, depending on the species, you're putting yourself in danger, and you're also putting everyone else that's exposed to that animal in danger because of the potential diseases they can transmit. And that's probably for a lot of them too. I know about the civets are a big deal because of SARS. They were associated with SARS, which is one of the a coronavirus. Basically, it was before COVID. They had SARS, and then MERS, which is Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. I think that was another species, camels or something it was associated with. But either way, animals, you shouldn't just think that it's simple as far as you're saying conservation and for the species, yes, but you also have to think about diseases as well that they could potentially bring with them. And
absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because this isn't maybe somebody doesn't care about the animals or the conservation. I would hope that they do, but let me tell you why it's terrible for humans as well. And it's really a risk to human health. So many of the infectious diseases we've seen over the years have been from zoonotic origin. And there are reasons for these quarantine laws. And when you talk about something like wildlife trafficking, you're circumventing those laws. You're circumventing quarantine. You're circumventing all of those requirements and those health requirements and inspections. And really, it's just a free-for-all. You're just bringing in these animals, smuggling them in, and bypassing quarantine. And putting everyone at risk and other animals at risk. It's a huge concern. And that's why AZA created the Reduce the Risk Initiative, which is trying to combat zoonotic diseases as a result of wildlife trade in general, whether that be the legal or illegal trade. But we know that when animals are stressed, they are susceptible to disease. So when you're talking about poaching animals from the wild, throwing them together in an unsanitary and unhealthy container, transporting them in inhumane ways, they're dehydrated, they're hungry, they're stressed, they're more susceptible to contracting those diseases. So that is why wildlife trafficking can exacerbate that problem.
Right. It's not a good thing to do at all. But yeah, I mean, again, the diseases they can give to us, and then the conditions that they're in that is going to impair their survival either way too, or making them more susceptible. That, think about it, they're not exposed to the diseases that are common in the US. So now they're in a stress situation, their immune system is low, and now they're more susceptible to other things that's present here and may not be present in their origin country or what have you. So it's a bad situation all the way around.
It is. And people, if you're thinking about getting an exotic pet in particular and bringing that into your home, you really need to make sure that you're being careful in what you're bringing. Even animals like lizards can carry salmonella. And, that's normal. And most people exposed to salmonella aren't going to have a problem with it. But if you have somebody who's elderly in your home or little children and their immune systems are compromised, that's something you really need to think about. Animals carry diseases. This is just the reality.
Right. Oh, that's perfect.
Let's see, I wanted to get into live animal trade, the wildlife confiscation, wait a minute, what is it? Confiscation network. So one of the questions that you have for it, what is it and why does it exist?
Thank you. This is a really exciting new program under the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance. We launched just a little over a year ago. We're currently piloting in Southern California with plans to expand nationwide in the next couple of years. But essentially, this is a network that was set in place to support law enforcement when they confiscate animals at and borders. So this is person driving over the Mexico-California border with tiger cubs in their trunk. Sounds crazy, happens. They find the tiger. Oh my gosh, what do we do with it? It is so imperative. We just talked about the conditions that these animals are trafficked in. These animals are typically confiscated, barely clinging on to life. It is imperative that we get that animal into the highest quality of care as quickly and efficiently as possible. We don't want them languishing. We want to increase their chances of survival. We want to make sure they get into a reputable facility where we can talk through what the end game is. Are they able to be released back into the wild? Very rare. We can talk about that later. With tiger cubs, no, they're not going to ever be releasable. So we need to make sure we can figure out where they should be placed long term. So this is something that occurs very regularly, unfortunately, and wildlife inspectors who come across these animals and have to confiscate them don't have any place to put them. And typically what would happen is inspector would stand there at the port with snakes in a bag, literally making phone calls. Can you take this animal? Can you take this animal? And it was based on personal relationships. There were a lot of untapped resources out there. Typically, the facilities that were located the closest to the port and border were called. So, for example, in Southern California, LA Zoo, San Diego Zoo, Aquarium of the Pacific, all the sort of very well-known ones were getting all of the calls and getting the burden. And then the facilities would either have to say yes, and sometimes they have to say no because they don't have the space, unfortunately. And then they were put in the position of having to coordinate care and placement. So this really just takes the burden off of everybody. It is a cooperative agreement through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We were able to hire a full-time confiscations coordinator, and she is the single point of contact. So law enforcement makes one phone call, one inquiry to one person, and she taps into this network that we've built of reputable facilities. It goes beyond just AZA accredited facilities. It includes sanctuaries, non-accredited facilities that have gone through our very thorough vetting process. And she taps into that network, and within minutes to hours can provide law enforcement with a short list of facilities that can take in these animals, and then will often help facilitate transport and coordinate the logistics. So it really takes the burden off of law enforcement, off of our bigger facilities near ports and borders that we're getting all of the phone calls, and also is in service to the animal that has been trafficked and put in this horrendous situation. It's not uncommon that we'll get a call from law enforcement for placement, and then, we're working on it. And then an hour later, we get another call from law enforcement saying the animal has passed. So you really need to go fast. And that's what this network is able to do. And that is, a very reactive thing. So that's why it's important that we're combating trafficking in other ways. This is reacting to the crisis and emergency situation. But I'm very proud of it. It's working well so far. Just in the last 14 months, our coordinator has helped place over 3,000 individual animals for law enforcement.
Wow. That's amazing and very inspiring to hear. I'm so glad that you guys have created this. So
yeah, it's been happening for years, and it's just been very uncoordinated, very unstructured, difficult for everybody. But really, the reality is when these animals are confiscated, there's only a few things, I think that was your next question, that you can do with them. You can euthanize them. You can send them back to where they came from, which is the exporting country, but that's not necessarily the point of origin. So if a tiger is being smuggled from Mexico to California, for example, and you send it back to Mexico, well, now it's Mexico's problem. And that probably didn't come from Mexico, unless it was captive bred.
Right.
But, or you can find placement. And what we hope to do is to create more opportunities for placement. and make sure that less animals are having to be euthanized, less animals are needing to go back to the place of export, not knowing what's going to happen to them, hoping they don't end up back in the illegal trade. What we see a lot is port hopping, where if somebody is turned away at one port, they'll try another port and they'll just keep trying it. So we need to make sure that all of these animals are being confiscated that need to be confiscated, and that the difficulty of finding placement for that animal isn't a barrier to law enforcement wanting to confiscate that animal. They have to make a very quick judgment call. Okay, confiscate this animal. If we can't find placement, we're going to have to destroy it. Or I can just sort of return it back and hope for the best. Doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen sometimes. They're doing their best. They're overwhelmed. They're understaffed. So this just helps everybody and everything. And we, of course, are also trying to bring more resources into this for the facilities that take in these animals, because very rarely are the facilities reimbursed for the cost of care. So the lifetime cost of care for a spider monkey, for example, can, be almost $2 million.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think people realize the cost that goes behind keeping a wild animal. So, for example, number one, do you know what to feed a tiger and how often? They eat large amounts of raw meats. So, I would imagine that you probably have to buy a cow a week or a cow every 2 weeks to feed a tiger.
Yeah, we have two problems going on here with the care, right? We have the traffickers who don't really care about providing the animal with the nourishment that it needs, not knowing, not caring, not having access to it. And then if that animal were to make it through our port or border and it goes to a home, does that person know what to feed it and how to care for it? And the answer is almost always no, because when these animals are confiscated from homes, I'm based in California, for example, and you cannot have a non-human primate. So state law enforcement, California Department of Fish and Wildlife Service, might get a tip that somebody has a spider monkey and they'll go confiscate that spider monkey. No, ma'am, you cannot have that in the state of California. Almost always when those animals are confiscated from those in-home situations, they're emaciated, they're in terrible health, they have diseases, they're, literally clinging to life. Like if hadn't been confiscated, they probably would have not survived. Many of the primates in particular and the big cats are being smuggled in as infants. Some of them are still nursing technically, and they're ripping them away from their mothers. And how do you replace mother's milk? Well, they have to be bottle fed with a very special formula. The average person, especially trafficker, isn't going to know what to do. So we need to make sure these are getting into animal care facilities that have experts that know how to take care of these animals. It's really a sad state of affairs, the condition in which the wildlife inspectors will find the animals, and then the condition in which an owner will either surrender an animal or have it confiscated from them.
Yeah.
It seems like a vicious circle in just what the animal has to go through when none of this is really necessary. But how does your organization ensure a high standard of animal well-being?
Yeah, we do this in a few ways, and the topic of well-being has become really critical over the last few years in the AZA community, and I'm really proud to see the evolution. So first of all, regarding the confiscations network, we have a vetting process and a vetting committee that every animal care facility must go through to prove that they have the expertise and the resources to provide those rescued animals with the highest quality of care possible. We are also hoping to make sure that more facilities can say yes, because there is resources there to reimburse them. And that will increase the number of facilities that are qualified facilities that are able to take in these animals. And then also from a trafficking standpoint, this is an incredibly cruel practice. These animals, I mean, I think we've already covered it. This is not a nice thing to do to animals. This is very cruel and impacts of course, the conservation of the species in the wild, but also the individual welfare of that animal. What they go through is absolutely horrendous. And then at AZA, more broadly, our members have long prioritized animal well-being as a high priority. But recently, AZA has come up with a strategic framework for the well-being of animals. You can find that at aza.org/about animal well-being. And essentially, this elevates the idea that the well-being of animals in our care, in our facilities, is both our moral responsibility, but also foundational to the mission and of our core values and who we are. If we're not taking the best care of the animals that are in our facilities, we shouldn't even be talking about rescuing animals in the wild and conservation, in situ conservation efforts. So it's really been embraced by the AZA community. It's really creating a collective culture around the idea of embracing well-being as our core function. The strategic framework has 5 priorities, including collaborating with animal welfare organizations, creating that common culture, elevating this into the core of everything we do in terms of our business plans, our collection plans, our morals and beliefs, and how we run the organization. And it's really just been great to see and grow. And there's now a well-being fund that AZA members can apply to and get some money to increase the welfare of animals in their care.
Okay. So then with this next question that came up, where does the role of consumer education and demand reduction fit in?
This is so important. This is the key, you guys. Without demand, this would not be happening. Yeah. Animals are being trafficked because people want them. They want them as pets. They want their products as household goods. If nobody wanted them, there wouldn't be a market. This is basic supply and demand. So it is so critically important that people are aware of this, aware of what to be on the lookout for as they're traveling, as they're, it's here in the United States, as they're shopping, consuming, particularly on the internet. You have to be really careful. It's really as easy as select, click, ship, and you can have yourself an exotic pet. And we're not telling people not to have exotic animals. That's, I have rescue parakeets, and I have a friend with a bearded dragon. There's nothing inherently wrong with having an exotic pet, but boy, we want to make sure people are educated from the trafficking standpoint to make sure that that animal wasn't illegally collected from the wild. In many cases, it could have been. And from just a well-being standpoint, to make sure that people know what they're getting themselves into in terms of what the cost of care is, what that animal needs. Are you going to be able to provide at that home? And then also from the product standpoint, do you really need these products that are made from endangered animals? The answer is no. Nobody needs it. And I understand in some cultures it's deeply rooted in their culture and passed down. But I really hope that we can collectively, as a world, look at what we're doing and think twice about it and wonder if that ivory trinket is worth the cost of the loss of an entire elephant and the loss of its entire family. So consumer education is so important. Stop buying it. Stop buying it. Stop wanting it. If the demand goes away, the market goes away, the traffickers have nobody to sell it to, and it'll stop. It's this, the same catch-22 that you see with the drug problem. Yes, you can stop the traffickers as much as you want, but if you catch one trafficker, there's going to be 5 more lined up ready to take their place. So really,
Yeah.
what it's about is getting at the core problem, which is drug use. And that's not my issue, but that gets into a whole set of complex problems like poverty and mental health. But really, we need to fix the root of the problem, and that's demand.
Right. I can tell
Well,
you, it's interesting. I was gonna say, let me just add one thing. It's interesting because I knew through the airline itself, we get emails of folks that are trying to get, at least they're assuming that an animal is being shipped to them, and it could be a CITES protected, say, I don't know, African gray parrot being shipped to the United States. That's a CITES protected animal, and they're saying, oh, well, does this seem right? And I was like, that's a researcher like that's a CITES protected animal. All of the different requirements that have to be met for it to come into the United States, and that it's is it right? Does it seem right? They're charging me $3,000, whatever. I was like, I don't know about all that. I just know that it's a CITES protected animal, and that to come into the United States, there's specific requirements that has to be met for that.
Yep.
So it's not
Absolutely.
as simple as order something on. No, it's not simple as you might think. And they're being scammed. A lot of situations, they're being scammed because of that. So they've got to pay attention to a lot of details. If you want an exotic animal, you need to do your research on it. Learn the requirements and everything, and make sure if you're getting it, it's being shipped here to the United States the proper way. So.
Yeah, be smart about it. There are, I get a question a lot. Well, how will I know if they're legitimate or not? Trust your gut. There are red flags. Ask questions. Ask questions in terms of, where did this animal come from? Many times it could be captive bred, and that's okay in some situations. But sometimes it might be wild caught. Yes, of course, somebody can lie to you. But if you ask the question and you get a sense that they're not telling you the truth, that's a red flag. Ask them about the laws and permits. Do I need a permit to own this animal? If they have no idea what they're talking about or what the answer to your question is, that's a good sign that they're probably not on the up and up. So just be smart, be aware, be conscious. Just know that many of these animals are coming in legally, but many are not. And just to make sure that you know the difference.
Yeah. Now, just out of curiosity, just to, I guess, to make the statement now, for exotic animals, do you have to have paperwork to own them?
Well, it completely depends. We have, of course, CITES that I mentioned, and that regulates the international trade on a global level. So importing, exporting. And then we have in the United States, for example, a patchwork of regulations, unfortunately. So it often will vary by state. It will vary sometimes by city, county ordinance. So you really have to do your research. I am based in California. What are the restrictions on exotic pet ownership in California? What are the exotic pet ownership restrictions in the county of Los Angeles? You can find these things online. And if you're caught, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for you, and it's not going to be good for the animal, because the animal, if you can't find placement, is going to have to be euthanized. That's your beloved pet. We want to make sure that we never get to that point in the first place. Luckily, we did recently pass the Big Cat Public Safety Act in Congress, which made that patchwork of state laws and ordinances uniform nationally. So we now have protection of owning big cats, and you can't own a big cat. You need to register it if you already own it. And hopefully this will prevent big cat ownership in the future. There's now on the docket for consideration something similar for primates. It's called the Primate Safety Act. So we need more of these national protections here in the United States to make sure that it's confusing for people. If you lived in Florida and it was okay to have, a primate in Florida, and you move to Oregon or somewhere where it's not okay, you got to know that. So it just makes it confusing, and we need to bring more protection to consumers and also to the animals. So we need better regulation at the federal level.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. 'Cause I think
So I know that.
I was gonna say the average person probably doesn't realize that. Well, I think I sometimes wonder if it's the entitlement of being an American citizen and stuff, but we feel like we can have anything we want, you know? We think we can just do whatever we want. I want it here. I can do whatever I want. But you have to realize for certain animal species, especially your wild or exotic animals, again, you're depending on your state or your county or city or any ordinance, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna vary. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear about the big cat one there. I didn't realize there's something for primates. That's going to be good
Just
too as well.
recently introduced. Yep, we're very excited about that prospect. The Big Cat Public Safety Act took years to pass, unfortunately. You know, you kind of have to wonder why something so common sense took years to pass, but that's politics at work, and we finally got it passed, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting.
Good job.
I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
No, the AZA has a Not a Pet campaign. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the Not a Pet initiative.
Yes, thank you. This is really the flip side of the coin to the confiscations problem. While the confiscations problem is dealing with a crisis, it's very reactive. The Not a Pet initiative was created to really reduce the demand and hopefully eventually to reduce the number of animals that are coming in illegally for the pet trade. So this is to educate people in a gentle way, not a shaming way. We just want people to have the right information. If they're thinking about owning an exotic pet or they already have one and they're thinking about adding to it, just raising awareness, providing them the education that they might need on that particular species, and just encouraging them to ask questions and be vigilant and make sure that that particular animal is legal to have. And it's just so incredibly important to do that upfront education. So many owners get themselves into the situation where they end up with an exotic pet and it's become really expensive. Perhaps it's reached the age of maturity and it's destroying the house. It can cause personal injury to members of your family. And we've all heard the horror stories. And then they have to give that animal up. And that's a very sad thing for the people who love them. And it's a very sad thing for the animal. So we want to make sure that people don't get themselves into that situation in the first place, and that they're doing that upfront education before they even obtain that pet.
What does the education include that you want them to know, the information you want them to know?
Sure. From the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance standpoint, we want them to know what they shouldn't be having at all. You know, you shouldn't have a non-human primate. You shouldn't have a big cat. These are coming in, you know, from the wild. We don't want you to have a CITES 1 listed animal. So there are some very black and white areas in which we want to make sure people understand. Just don't ever own that kind of pet. But then there's this gray area, right, where we could have, perhaps it's CITES 2 listed, which means you could technically import it if you can prove that that import doesn't impact the survival of that species in the wild. So just to, again, make sure you're working with a legitimate source. Make sure you know what you're getting into in terms of care, feeding, enrichment, space. What are you going to do? Some of these animals live a really long time. What are you going to do when you pass away and you have a parrot that lives 60 years? So just, we want people to be thinking about this in the long term from the legality standpoint, but also from the animal welfare and personal protection standpoint.
Well, you just brought up a really good point. So a parrot lives 60 years, but what does someone do if they don't want the animal anymore?
Yeah, these are the situations that break my heart. And many of the animals that are currently at sanctuaries or even many of our accredited zoos and aquariums have come from owner surrenders. People will either bring them in and say, I can't care for this animal anymore, and the facility will take it because it has nowhere else to go, or they'll leave it on the doorstep. Those are all terrible things to have happen, but we would prefer that happen over the other alternative, which is people let them go.
Yeah.
Absolutely never let your exotic pet go into the wild. People think that they're doing it a favor. Oh, I have this turtle, I can't take care of it, I'm moving, I don't know what to do with it, or it's outgrown its tank and I don't have space for it. I'm just going to go find the nearest watershed and release it there. And my gosh, you're giving that animal a death sentence. First of all, it can very unlikely to survive in the wild. And you're also potentially introducing invasive species into the environment. And this can absolutely wreak havoc on biodiversity. So we want to absolutely, under no circumstances, should you be releasing your exotic pet back into the wild. Some states have exotic pet amnesty programs through their local humane society. I know the Florida State Wildlife Agency, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, has an amnesty program. So you can bring your unwanted pets and they will help find placement for it. So if you do have a pet and you no longer want it, be looking for those resources, and make sure if you do have to turn it over, you're turning it over to a legitimate organization that is going to find the best place for that. But please, please, please do not release it into the wild.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know you brought up Florida. There's been so many stories about how people have just dumped their exotic animals, particularly snakes, in the Everglades.
Yes.
And so I think there was a couple of different times I read the report how like one specific species was multiplying so fast that it was shifting the integrity of the culture within the Everglades. A couple of different times I've read that. So the
ecosystem is fragile and delicate, and there's a balance, and there's a reason why we have laws in place for invasive species, and our state wildlife agencies and our federal wildlife agency, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, have rules in place for what can and should be in a particular area. And if you go messing with that, it throws the entire ecosystem off, introduces potential diseases, kills off native species. It just becomes a real problem. And I will say many of the animals that have come from confiscations that are in sanctuaries or zoos and aquariums are from owners, previously owned animals that either it was illegal for them to have, so they were taken, or they couldn't take care of them anymore and they gave them up. And what I want to say is that is taking precious space and resources away from the animals that are intentionally being smuggled in. So, if you just please give it a lot of thought if you want to bring an exotic pet into your home.
You don't think about how one little thing affects so many other different things. It's just like it's just better not to do any of it.
Yes, agree. Agree.
Yeah. Wow.
Dr. Bryant, do you have any other questions for Miss Sarah?
I'm happy you were here, Sarah, and just sharing. I'm quiet because I'm being enlightened myself. So thank you so much for sharing the information. I think we got a lot of information out here for folks to understand and see. And I'm hoping one of your main topics, as far as for folks really think strongly about owning an exotic pet and everything. Mm-hmm. They grow up, they get bigger, and you have to account for that. And you're saying for certain parents, potentially they can outlive you. You got to think about all of that when you're at, from the start, basically. So I love it. Thank you for sharing everything.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I appreciate you and everything you're doing for animals.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you.
Now, Sarah, I wanted to ask real quick. You mentioned both AZA And then you also mentioned the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance. Do one or both of those organizations, do they work with other major organizations so that they can get a broader reach in their messaging, like the American Humane? Because I know the American Humane does so much worldwide, and it just seems like there's a lot of synergy in what both organizations or all three organizations do.
Mm-hmm. So the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance is a program of AZA. So we are integrated into AZA. It operates as a program, and being an alliance of 105 organizations now, we collaborate very frequently with Humane Society of the United States, International Fund for Animal Welfare, Wild Aid, all sorts of different organizations. AZA and the strategic framework for the animal well-being that I mentioned, one of the 5 priorities is collaboration and partnership development. So that is central, one of their central pillars to that framework, in working with other animal well-being organizations to collaborate, make sure we are sharing best practices as we learn them, listening to best practices and applying that to our own husbandry. But very important, collaboration is so important. We can't work in silos. We can't do this alone. This is a huge, huge problem. And it's going to take everybody, and it's going to take everybody working together.
Absolutely. And, you know, if there's individuals or even organizations that would like to assist the AZA or find out more about the AZA and the Wildlife Trafficking Alliances, we have several websites for you to check out. And let's see, I think most, there's the aza.org, as well as the notapet.net. You know, all of these will help you learn more so that they can answer your questions. And then you want to make sure that you follow AZA and Wildlife Trafficking Alliance and Not a Pet Initiative on your social media as well, because it takes all of us to help combat this problem. And, you know, I believe the more that people know, the better that they do. So let's just hope for that.
People in general are good, and what we find is people who want animals are animal lovers. So I like to come to them with the understanding and empathy that we're all trying to do our best for animals. And the more you know, the better you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to keep an eye on our comments. Well, both Dr. Bryant and I do. So we definitely had a follower make a comment that they're enjoying this live and all of the information we're sharing. So thank you so much. I hope I'm saying the name correctly, Raju Mia. But thank you for tuning in and watching. Sarah, is there any last messages that you would like to share? Any last comments?
I just want to reiterate that consumers are the key to ending wildlife trafficking. No demand, no market. So let's end it.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely praise you, Sarah, for the big initiatives that you are taking on, and someone's got to do it. So at least you're passionate about it, and you will do it well. Dr. Bryant, is there anything that you would like to say?
No, I'm just very excited you're here, Sarah. Thank you so much. And I love what you're doing is amazing. So thank you.
Back at you. Mm-hmm. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
So that you know, I will create a flyer for you about CITES and share that out there so that people will have the website, and we'll help post that on social media. But for now, we ran a little bit over, but that's okay because this was exciting. And I just want to tell everybody, thank you for joining us today. And we hope that you will join us again next Friday for another Facebook Live with Dr. Nelva Bryant. So for now, we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Stay right there, Sarah.